Riz Ahmed, you starred in The Night of, the HBO miniseries, as Nasir Khan, who is arrested and tried for murder that he's not even sure if he's guilty of or not. What first appealed to you about this series and character when the opportunity first presented itself?
Well, first of all, thanks for taking out some time to talk. Well, to be honest, when the audition first came up, I knew nothing about it. I knew very little about it. My agent told me that I was getting on a plane from Venice Film Festival after the premiere of Reluctant Fundamentalist back to London, and my agent sent me the script just as I was getting on the plane and said, "You've got an audition as soon as you land." And I just knew very little about it. I didn't even know who the writers were. I didn't know it was these amazing people like Richard Price and Steve Zalian that were involved. I didn't know James Gandolfini was involved at that stage. I just read the pilot, thought it was pretty cool, and just went and kind of quickly knocked out an audition with not very much time to prepare. And in a way, I think that was a blessing, because if I'd known, the caliber of people involved, I think I would have been a lot more nervous going into the audition. So really, what appealed to me wasn't any of that. It was just really cool writing. It was a page turner. It was thrilling. It was just purely a good script. I was completely blind going in. Other than that,
And The Night of course, had kind of a complicated history, coming to fruition, because of course James Gandolfini, who was intended to play the role of your lawyer, who ended up being played by John Turturro, he died before he could film the whole thing. How much did you work with him, and what was that experience like, transitioning from him to John Turturro and coping with all that?
Well, yeah, I think James was one of the key driving forces as an executive producer on the project. And it was a big blow, I think, to everyone, just not just those of us involved in the project, but just, everyone who knows how amazingly gifted and talented he was, when he passed away. In the pilot episode, the character of John Stone only appears in kind of 1.5 scenes, really, kind of just towards the end. So when we were actually shooting the pilot, it was the same. It was kind of like a 3-week shoot, or 2-week shoot, or something like that. And it was pretty much just myself and Sophia Black-Delia, who plays Andrea. And James actually just kind of came in just for a day and a half right at the end. So I didn't really get to meet him for too many days or work with him too much, but seeing him even in that short space of time gave me a really clear idea of the kind of guy he was. He was just kind of joking around with the crew the whole time, creating a really kind of relaxed, fun atmosphere, but in the middle of that still took his work really seriously. You see someone who's as experienced and seasoned and acclaimed as that, from one take to the next going, actually, that was no good. No, we got to do that again. And that's kind of inspiring. He still takes his craft so seriously. He's still trying to push himself. Very generous as well. Hurricane Sandy had just taken place, and lots of people were kind of shaken up. I remember the day that he came to work, he kind of laid on a sushi chef for everyone, and all these kind of special treats. So yeah, I just worked with him for like one day, and we had one scene where he just walked past me when I was in the holding cell, and that was it. But yeah, his presence was certainly felt. Having said that, because he was just in one or two scenes in that pilot episode, technically speaking, it was doable. When his role was then filled in by John Turturro, it wasn't like we had to reshoot the whole pilot. The whole pilot could actually still work. It was just those 2 scenes that we needed to reshoot. But just getting to that point of reshooting and picking up the series was a really long journey. The show didn't get picked up to begin with. Then when it did, James passed away. Then the project was done. Then Robert De Niro wanted to do it. Then it was up and running with that, and the scripts were all getting ready. Then he stepped away. Then the project was definitely done. Then it was like, get to New York next week. John Turturro wants to do it, and we'll do it. And so it was definitely a big roller coaster, just even getting to that point.
Yeah, what was it like after all those ups and downs and the long road to get this series finally finished and aired? How did it feel to kind of wrap after the 8 episodes and realize that it had finally been done and you'd all kind of pulled it off?
You know, it was kind of crazy, man, to be honest. It's like, you know, I've never been part of a project that takes place across like 4.5 years. I don't think many people, you know, end up working on those kind of projects. It was just a big part of my life, you know, and the person I was when I shot the pilot was totally different to the person I was when we finished shooting, kind of like Nas's journey in a way, you know. Although I'd been through, you know, very different things and not as much as he had, but it was just a big chunk of everyone's life. And again, the fact that we'd been through so many ups and downs before we'd even started the first day of shooting the series meant that, I don't know, it just felt like it wasn't easy, you know, emotionally. And then when we started shooting the project, it was quite heavy, the material, very long days. For me personally, I had to kind of undergo this physical transformation, which was really, really arduous and tiring. So it was this killer job that we were thinking, it's kind of like weirdly cursed or something, you know what I mean? It's like, it's been through so many ups and downs before we even started shooting. Now we are shooting. It's really heavy material. We're all feeling the responsibility of it. It's super draining, super tiring, really intense. It's like, you know, when we wrapped, we were just kind of like, okay, we're done with that. And for it to then go on and kind of be so well received is kind of insane. It's kind of crazy because all the associations that I think we had with this project were about struggle, you know, and like going through a tough time to try and make it through. So the fact that it's now kind of everyone's just like enjoying it, saying, "Oh, it's a really cool show." It's kind of like it's weird in a way, you know.
One of the big mysteries of, you know, it's a mystery series. One of the big mysteries, of course, is whether or not Nas actually committed the murder. And as I mentioned, Nas himself isn't entirely sure one way or the other. There were drugs involved. So I was wondering, how much did you know about the story arc going in? Were you learning it episode by episode? Did you sort of have all the scripts laid out and know where it was going?
Yeah. So when I did the pilot, I had no idea where it was going. None of us did. We just did the pilot as a kind of standalone movie almost. But Steve obviously had an idea of what he wanted to do with it, and so did Richard Price. And when they kind of turned all the scripts in and sent them over to me, I got them pretty much like, you know, a month before we were going to start shooting. And you've got 8 hours to prepare. That's not a great deal of time. So I kind of very quickly just kind of went down a wormhole of like buying a massive kind of notice board thing, a massive like, you know, A1 card, and it just covered my walls in my apartment that I was staying in New York with like scene by scene breakdown of Nas's journey and almost kind of how he transforms from kind of almost like one kind of animal into another kind of animal, you know, by the end of the show. So just trying to kind of mark out all the different kind of the threads, you know, there's the drugs thread, there's the Chandra thread, there's lots going on, and they all kind of go from this kind of place all the way over here to a place of like, oh wow, I'm going to get invited to a party with girls, like, you know, only slept with one girl, to ending up being accused of being a rapist and kind of like making a slightly predatory move, sexual move on his lawyer. Like there's just a massive journey on you know, lots of different levels. Just even in terms of how he sees himself. So it was something that we had to kind of chart out, you know, and kind of almost plot, you know, how each different beat kind of allows a different stage of the evolution of Nas. So that was quite technical in a way, you know, particularly when you've got a character that doesn't have a lot of dialogue. You kind of just want to make sure that, you know, that evolution is one that the audience kind of buy into, and it feels convincing, you know, to some extent. And so it was something that we kind of spent a lot of time kind of stressing over and and trying to kind of mark out.
Yeah, as an actor, you're playing this character who doesn't know necessarily what the truth is, and the series sort of leaves it ambiguous. We don't know 100% one way or the other by the time the series is over. Did you find yourself developing an opinion one way or another about Nas's guilt or innocence? Because the character himself isn't sure, so maybe you just wanted to play the ambiguity, or did you have an opinion?
Well, for Nas himself, as you say, he's not sure. And I think that idea of not knowing is a really important one. And it's one that Nas kind of has to try to embrace in a way. You're coming from a starting point with a character like Nas where you know your place. The world is telling you what your place is. You know what your place is as a son. You know what you're aiming towards as someone who's like studying accounts and wants to kind of, go down that road career-wise, and you suddenly end up in a place where you don't know anything. Like your whole world that you've built your life on quicksand. It's all kind of sinking and falling apart around you. You don't know who you can trust in prison. You don't know who you should be, make alliances with. You don't know if you're guilty or not. You don't know what lawyer you should hire. You don't know if your parents even believe you. It's suddenly you're kind of just engulfed in this in kind of this sense of like not having control and not having any grip on a sense of certainty about who you are and your relationship to the world. So actually for me that was something that I ran with. I think Nas is day to day trying to kind of convince himself that he didn't do it, but as each day goes by I think he's also realizing that he's probably capable of doing it, and on deep down, maybe there's enough darkness in everyone to be capable of something like that. And when you're forced to kind of mine that darkness and allow that darkness to come to the surface just to survive, you have a very uneasy relationship with your own sense of innocence. So that kind of gray area was really important for the character, I felt, psychologically.
You're a British actor, of course, and this is a very specific story about the American criminal justice system, very procedural in the ins and outs and the day-to-day of what goes on. Was there anything about it that surprised you as you were learning about it over the course of making the series?
Quite a lot of it, was eye-opening to me, particularly when I was, as part of the research, we went to Rikers prison. And it was interesting hearing from some of the guards there. They said, when you're a new guard, the prisoners try and test you, and the only way you can win their respect is if you fight them. And I was like, what do you mean? It was like, when this prison guard was telling me, and a lot of our extras were ex-prison guards as well. And a lot of our extras had been to prison as well. So even on set and off set, we were able to kind of soak up those stories. And this one prison guard was telling me about how, he was new and these prisoners were testing him. So he said, right, me and you outside. So he takes him, cuffs him, takes him outside. Another prison guard's keeping watch, making sure there's no superiors there. He uncuffs him, and the prison guard and the prisoner go at it. And it's got that kind of dog-eat-dog gladiatorial vibe in Rikers, which is, crazy. It's so intense. So that was eye-opening to me. And also kind of interviewing a lot of people that had been through the prison system was really eye-opening. In terms of the stories they were telling, but not even just those kind of crazy stories about how people smuggle things into prison and how you get a cell phone in and fighting and all that kind of stuff. More just on an emotional level, it was really eye-opening for me. How you have to face yourself every day, and the idea of losing hope. How do you survive without hope? That was really kind of stayed with me. I interviewed a lot of people that had been through prison, and also some NGOs like the Innocence Project, who use DNA evidence to exonerate people who've been wrongly convicted. And just some of the stories and people's sense of grace. People who've been in the prison system for years, and then they come out and they have to forgive. It's not easy. That's one theme that really stuck with me. The idea of adjusting after prison is very difficult. The story of Khalif Browder came out in the New Yorker magazine. It was a kid who was held without trial for 3 years in Rikers for stealing a backpack, which he didn't do. And when he finally got let out after 3 years in there with murderers, and he couldn't adjust, and he killed himself. So that emotional side was eye-opening to me, alongside the crazy stories, of which there were plenty.
And Nas, of course, going through this system, you know, as you alluded to, you know, he goes through such a drastic change throughout the series. You know, not just emotionally, but even his physical presence is different from the beginning to the end of the series. What was it like tracing that kind of path with him from, you know, bit by bit, little by little, from beginning to end?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, that was something that we kind of like, I realized, you know, with a lot of characters, their emotional makeup might be altered from the beginning of a story to the end of a story. Their goals or their outlook might change. But really, for them to undergo this kind of scale of transformation is quite rare. It's certainly something that I hadn't tackled before. I've played characters that go from living to dead, you know, but that's different. They're still the same dude on some level. This was kind of like it's like a caterpillar going into a cocoon, you know, of Rikers, and what comes out isn't a butterfly, it's a wolf. And so what happens in that cocoon, what kind of weird chemistry is going down in there was something that we really had to kind of chart out and plot out, and how each scene might kind of turn the volume up or down a little bit on different sides of his personality, his relationship with women, with violence, with himself, with trust, with drugs, with his family. How all those kind of things are fluctuating was something that we had to mark out. But in a way, the simplest part of it was the physical transformation, because that was very clear to me that he starts off, you know, he's not someone who works out. That's not his deal. And he's at his peak physically by like episode 6, which is when he's kind of biggest. And then at episode 6, end of episode 6, he starts smoking heroin. So then for episodes 7 and 8, I started dropping weight again, dropping muscle. So that was actually something that was quite clear. You know, you could chart that like this. It wasn't so much this kind of thing, which is a lot of the other kind of aspects to his transformation were.
And you know, it's, you know, after the long road of this film getting made and then you know, finally premiering, it's almost you know, kind of like fate, because it's coming out in what is turning out to be a pretty big year for you, because you have this little indie movie coming out called Rogue One, a Star Wars story, you know, in December, and you know, how different creatively is sort of one thing to the other?
You know, it's interesting because you would think that television and a big movie are really different. And in some senses they are, because the content and the stories are very different, and the tone of the movie is kind of different. But these days, I think TV series can feel like movies. You know, I think certainly the way Steve Zalian approached it is, he said, I think of this as a movie. You know, I think of this as an 8-hour movie. In terms of my ambitions for it and for its kind of level of quality and the way it's shot. We just had a really amazing team on it. So they were both like 8-month or, you know, long shoots or whatever. They both took place in studios. Obviously, they're just really, really, really different characters. And I think that was the main difference, you know, different world, different character. One is kind of very much kind of trying to do a very you know, very kind of crafted presentation of reality, and the other one is about kind of exploring your imaginative boundaries. You know, you're in space, and you know, you're flying spaceships, and there's all this kind of stuff. So I think as an actor, the acting process was the thing that was most different. In terms of the scale of the production, the quality of the people involved, it was actually kind of similar. It was just that, you know, Nas is someone who's kind of forced to be very still. He's in this kind of cocoon, and all the things that are happening, these chemical rumblings of transformation, they're happening under the surface. Whereas Bodhi Rook is, you know, on the run, you know, flying spaceships, you know, while trying to sort out this whole Death Star situation. So that has a kind of kinetic energy, and he's a frenetic character. So I think the biggest difference was the kind of the acting side, in a way.
Now, the night of was shrouded in mystery, but I can't help but imagine that it must be kind of nothing compared to the amount of secrecy involved when making a Star Wars film. Of course, I'm sure there's not much you can reveal or that we even really want you to reveal, since we'd like to see it for ourselves when it's released. But what has it been like, making a film and then having something like this be so tightly under wraps?
It's you do have to kind of second guess yourself before answering any questions, even that one. It's kind of amazing in a way, because every day it makes you realize that how seriously, you have to take your responsibility, in telling this story. At the end of every day, we had to give our script sides back to, the assistant directors. The script sides were all printed on red paper because they can't be photocopied. In order to read your scripts on your tablet or your phone, it's not being emailed to you as a PDF. You have to log into a special kind of site where you can't take screenshots. So it's kind of intense in a way, but it kind of makes you realize, listen, this matters to people. The anticipation matters to people. It's the element of surprise and wonder matters to people. And so this story matters, and you better work hard. So in a way, that kind of set that level of care around not spoiling the surprise for fans feeds into your sense of, you got to up your game and give it everything. Having said that, it can also just be a real pain in the ass to to be able to just read a script and see what's going on.
Well, I want to congratulate you again on the night of and on Rogue One, and best of luck with both going forward. I have my fingers crossed for lots of awards attention for the night of, especially. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Oh, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it. Take care.